Screwed news. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker has just dealt the latest blow in the war on working people in the United States. Earlier today, he signed America's latest right-to-work legislation into law. Right-to-work laws, which actually should be called right-to-work-for-less laws, are designed to screw over working-class Americans by hurting the power or diminishing the power of unions. Conservatives have been introducing these laws all over the country in an effort to destroy what little is left of organized labor in America. And it shouldn't come as a surprise that ultra-pro-business groups like ALEC are behind right-to-work-for-less laws. But while these laws are spreading nationwide and weakening unions left and right, many people still don't understand what these laws do or just how devastating they can be. So here to help us understand more about right-to-work-for-less laws and the people behind them are Brendan Fisher, General Counsel for the Center for Media and Democracy, and Mark Ames, Senior Editor for Pando Daily and author of Going Postal: Rage, Murder, and Rebellion from Reagan's Workplaces to Clinton's Columbine and Beyond. And thank you both for joining me. Great to have you both with us.
Thank you.
Brendan.
Thank you.
Mark. Mark, what exactly are right-to-work laws?
Well, I wrote about right-to-work laws, essentially. It's a euphemism. It's a very Orwellian euphemism that is about dividing and conquering workplaces and making it hard for workers to organize. So the opposite of it is union security. Right-to-work laws basically allow or mandate from the state that that labor unions cannot organize in workplaces, and then mandate that everybody who benefits from the contracts that they're able to negotiate, that they pay dues for it. So you can basically have all kinds of workers joining, employees joining, not paying the union dues, and that way you starve the union.
Right.
But what's more important, I think, it's, because we've a lot of people in the progressive liberal world have moved so far away from the labor world over the years. I think it's instructive to know about the history of the right-to-work laws.
You're talking about Vance Muse and the Christian American League. Go for it.
Exactly. It's a very dark, ugly history. And when you understand where these laws come from, then you really understand the purpose of them. So this guy Vance Muse, he's basically the guy who invented right-to-work laws and even the euphemism right-to-work in the early 40s. This is a guy who he makes Karl Rove look like an angel. This is how bad this guy was. He was a top lobbyist, investigated by Congress, investigated by FBI for all sorts of corruption over the years, lobbied against child labor laws, lobbied against women's suffrage, was an operator in 1936, 1940, and 44 to try to split the Democrat Party and pull away the racist Southern part of it. By doing things like he would distribute photographs of Eleanor Roosevelt with two black professors from Howard University and distribute it around Southern conferences to try to get Southern Democrats to maybe either vote against the New Deal or vote against Roosevelt or vote Republican, actually.
Amazing. Amazing.
And he founded this organization, Christian American, which was basically it was allied with the KKK. It's essentially like an offshoot of the KKK in Texas, specifically to bust unions, because under Roosevelt, as we know, we had the first laws that really protected labor unions and allowed them to start flourishing. Right. And so it was really Vance Muse and Christian American. And I have quotes from him that that are in the article that I wrote about, which are just, I mean, they're really disgusting, racist, anti-Semitic quotes.
Right. Liberal use of the N-word and pretty amazing stuff. Mm-hmm. Brendan, I understand that ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, has played a role in Wisconsin's right-to-work legislation.
Yeah.
Or right-to-work-for-less legislation.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
And that may not be a big surprise. We looked at the Wisconsin Right to Work bill and matched it up to the ALEC Model Right to Work Act, and it was the operative language was basically a word-for-word copy. And it's not a huge surprise given that the head of both the Senate and the Assembly are not only ALEC members, but were the ALEC state chairs for Wisconsin in recent years. And Scott Walker is an ALEC alumni. He was a legislator. When he was a legislator, he was an ALEC member. Huh. And in addition, once the bill was introduced, not only did the National Right to Work Committee and the Heritage Foundation testify in favor of it, the Wisconsin Policy Research Institute commissioned a study from a guy named Richard Vedder to show the purported benefits of right to work for Wisconsin. But Richard Vedder is on the ALEC Board of Scholars. So in Wisconsin, we have a member of the ALEC Board of Scholars telling the people of Wisconsin how great this ALEC bill is going to be for the economy and for the public. His study did run against the common economic wisdom, or the leading studies on the impact of right to work, which is to lower wages and to ultimately have a negative impact on working people in the state.
Right. Mark, Americans seem to be largely in the dark about this history. I'm astonished by how frequently conservatives come on this program and will say things like, "Oh, Lyndon Johnson said if you just give these folks, speaking of people of color, free food, then they'll vote for you forever," or words to that effect. I mean, basically, this is the Republican hit on the Great Society. It's almost certainly a quote that never happened, but every Republican believes that piece of history to be true, that welfare programs were put into place by Democrats to get black voters, basically. It's racist, horrible stuff. This is actually true, this history, and Vance Muse and the Christian American League and the whole right to work thing. Why is it that Americans don't know this? It almost seems like if the tables were turned, if it was Republicans and Democrats, if they were opposite, that everybody would know it,
I think they understood it better up through, let's say, the 70s, when the left kind of cleaved and the kind of middle class part of the left really moved away. And maybe it started even earlier in the 70s, but definitely in the 70s. The middle class part of the left and the liberals really moved away from labor, yeah. That's really allowed big business and the right wing then to isolate labor and start destroying it, sort of out of view of their former kind of allies. Not always the best allies, but generally allies from when the liberals and progressives and so on. Right. I think that's really the big reason. I mean, I would ask, why do we not know, for example, if you go back through labor history, there's been an enormous amount of violence by corporations and by the state against labor organizers, whether top organizers or just rank and file organizers. I mean, how many, we don't know even. Nobody, as far as I know, has ever added up, no historian, how many people have been killed going back, through the 19th century in all the various massacres, killings, beatings, and so on. How many people have been killed? No one's even done that study, as far as I know. And in fact, I'll bet you a lot of people don't even know that there have been enormous amounts of labor organizers killed, over the decades.
The other thing that I find astonishing that every American doesn't know is that in a right to work for less state, on average, individual workers make a little more than $5,000 less than their peers in a union security state, and a household income is in the neighborhood of $6,000 per person less. How do we get this message? Brendan, any thoughts on how we get these messages out?
Yeah, I mean, I think really the only reason, the strongest argument that right-to-work supporters can make for a right-to-work law is that it's going to lower wages. And maybe years ago that may have attracted some businesses to the state, but at this point, in an era of globalization, a company that's looking for low wages is going to go to China, or they're going to go to Mexico. Companies looking to relocate are probably going to be looking for things like a skilled workforce or well-developed infrastructure. Right. But this really benefits the giant corporations and the low-road employers in the state, and it defunds unions, which are a major political counterbalance to corporations and corporate influence.
Right. And Mark, isn't that really the essence of the whole thing? I mean, it's like back in 2006 when they poison-pilled the post office with this pre-fund $5 billion a year, 75-year, the whole thing. It was, at that point, the post office was so profitable that they were talking about taking a third of their car fleet and replacing them with renewable energy vehicles, with electric vehicles. And But the two largest employers in the United States were Walmart, which is not unionized, and the post office, which is. Surprise, surprise, they went after the post office. I mean, this is, the Republicans for a long, long time, since the 30s, have viewed unions as a funding source for the Democratic Party. This is the principal reason they're going after them, is it not?
Absolutely. You know, I should add that Fred Koch, the father of Charles and David Koch, got his start in politics, at least that we know of, when he sort of became a public figure in the mid-50s in the Right to Work movement, passing the Kansas Right to Work law. And then he went directly from that to John Birch. And, you know, so that, I mean, there's a kind of seamlessness between Fred Koch, John Birch, Charles Koch, Alec. This is really important to them. And, you know, the thing is, I hate to say this, but the right and the libertarians and the Kochs understand the politics of this a lot better than a lot of liberals and progressives on the left understand it.
Well, they certainly understand the PR of it, you know, given that they're lying about the actual consequences of their legislation. I guess they would have to understand the PR if they're going to base an entire policy thing on a lie. Brennan, where do we go from here?
Well, Wisconsin is now the 50th right-to-work state, so more
25th.
than 25th, I'm sorry. More than half of, 50%, more than half of the country is now right to work. There's a bill moving in New Hampshire, which is also a word-for-word copy of the ALEC Right to Work Act. Bills were introduced in West Virginia and Kentucky that also included ALEC language. So this is going to continue to move through a lot of states and a lot of state legislatures. So where do we go from here? I mean, I think we're going to see lower wages, and we're going to see reductions in union influence. So I think that I'm sure that unions are going to be looking for new ways to organize, but it is going to be a lot harder under these right-to-work laws.
It's like these guys are just absolutely committed to rolling back the New Deal.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. This is their entire mission, and then end up with a Democratic Party that is no longer the loyal opposition. You know, is defanged, defunded. And now we've got single-party rule. It's amazing. Brennan Fisher, Mark Ames, gentlemen, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Great to see you both.
Thanks for having me on.